Star Wars show. If you want to email me, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, as we talk about the Skeleton Crew finale, potential plot details for The Mandalorian and Grogu, and the return of some fan favorites to an upcoming season 2, but I have other speculation regarding that. First off, let's talk a little bit about Skeleton Crew.
This is not going to go the way you think.
What an absolutely wonderful show. That finale was fantastic for what the show was. If you go and hopefully a lot of you can do this. I can't do this because I just consume so much Star Wars content that just it's kind of almost impossible to go and do so. But if you kind of just strip out everything else and just look at it through the lens of this being new Star Wars and take away the fact that we've been privileged to have a lot of Star Wars content, both good and bad, since Disney went and purchased Lucasfilm, this show, for what it was fantastic. I can only dream that Disney would release this as one cohesive story, as I've mentioned, taking out the breaks between episodes. I went and did the math. When you cut out the minute or so recap and the credits at the end of each episode, it's about 250 minutes. So it's about 4 hours worth of content. I wouldn't want to cut anything out of the show. I would just love to see, a 4-hour movie to be able to go in and watch. And listen, granted, it's nothing to have an episode end and then hit play next episode, but there is the break in time, and I would love to see the story just simply continue. Now, maybe I'm wrong in that, and the way the show is edited, it wouldn't flow quite right, but either way, I thought the finale absolutely brought it home. My theory of Snoke was completely wrong, and I'm actually really excited that my theory about Snoke was wrong, because I think that would have been a mistake in hindsight. But my speculation that there would be a battle that took place on at Atten at the end with the pirates showing up, that ended up being totally correct, as did my speculation that Neil would find the gun on top of the building and use it in an effort to go and fight off the pirates. But it ended up being a wonderful show. The sequence on the speeder bikes with the kids and the father was spectacular. So reminiscent of the bicycle chase in the movie E.T. My only wish is that Fern could have been there with him on those speeders, apart from the dad. But the dad was a lot of fun too, in him going on this adventure with them. But that whole sequence was absolutely fantastic. The pirates coming on to Atten, and creating the chaos and mayhem that they did. And listen, it was something similar to what they did in the Book of Boba Fett, but this was a much, much better execution than what they did in Book of Boba Fett. Book of Boba Fett should have been this large-scale battle that took place on Tatooine, and it just came off as really, really flimsy in my opinion, where this, in terms of scale, really ended up nailing it. And it was just a fantastic adventure to go on. And what makes the story great is, unfortunately, something that really hurt the show in and of itself. And I'll explain here in just a moment. The one thing that I wanted to add to this was the whole reason Atten was there. The show ended really abruptly. I don't think that was intentional, by the way. Well, I mean, I think it's intentional the way that they ended it, but I actually think there was something else they were going to do with the show, and they stopped short. And I'll explain here in a bit. But the end of the show left a lot of questions, right? We really never fully got an answer as to what was going on with the Mint related to the larger galaxy, even though I'm pretty sure I can extrapolate what happened. We don't know where Jod Na-Na-Wood goes from there, or certainly what happens with the kids. But I'm totally and completely okay with that. The ending reminded me quite a bit of the ending of A New Hope, wherein the good guys win, but you do get that final shot of Vader's advanced TIE fighter tumbling off into space before straightening out and then flying away. So it's not unlike Star Wars to go and end this way and leave some ambiguity and questions unanswered. Hopefully we get a season 2 based off of the viewership. I don't think we're going to. But again, I'll get to that in a moment. But this is the one thing that I wanted to bring up regarding the show. So At-Aten was clearly a mint for the Republic. That planet clearly was there to create the money for the Republic. And as the supervisor said, which ended up being a massive droid, the planet ended up operating on its own ever since the last transmission from the Republic before the rise of the Empire and the Empire took over. So they already had their set of rules. They were hidden because it was a mint, and it needed to be kept hidden from the rest of the galaxy. And so without any further orders from the Republic, the supervisor just kept having the inhabitants throughout the decades do what they were doing. So it wasn't anything nefarious at all. It's just that this is what this planet did. It reminds me of North Korea, but not in a bad way, like what it's like in North Korea, where everybody is shut off from the rest of the world. And while you might look at that as being unfortunate, and there certainly is an angle that you can take of the individuals on there not being able to leave the planet, at the same time, it wasn't because of nefarious intent, and everybody seemed to be living normal, nice lives on the planet, just as if all of us living on Earth would live that don't have the ability to go get into a spaceship and fly away, right? Apart from the fact that you have individuals like Wim who seek adventure and want to get off the planet. It does raise the question of why did the Empire go and leave this planet alone? So this is what I think happened. I assume that that's the answer to what happened to the other planets. So we know that there were a host of these planets that were like At-Aten, and I had speculated wrongly that maybe these other planets were test planets for some experiment. And that wasn't the case, obviously. I think all these planets were mints for the Republic. And my guess is that the other planets were actually discovered by the Empire, and that the mints were plundered for their gold and then just cast aside. And that the Empire simply never discovered this final planet being At-Aten. That's my guess as to why this planet remained while the other ones were destroyed, and why on At-Akron they found individuals there that had Empire armor and gear. So I just assume the Empire did find the other mints, plundered them, but was never able to find At-Aten, so it's just remained a secret for all of these years. My guess is, by the way, that for Jadna Nawud, given the background that he was found at a young age by a female Jedi, and that what I assume was during Order 66, that Jedi was killed in front of him, that backstory will be told at some point in time. Probably not in live action. I imagine it's probably going to be something that we end up seeing, maybe like in a Tales of the Jedi cartoon, those shorter animated shows that they did, Tales of the Empire and Tales of the Jedi, or perhaps even in a comic book. But I thought the finale was great. The arrival of the Republic ships was spectacular. To see B-Wings in action was awesome. And again, I give the show a 9 out of 10. I really, really loved it, and I'm looking forward, and so is my wife, who's been not the biggest fan of the live-action TV shows. Looking forward to watching it, in its entirety. Probably not in one sitting, but working through it over the course of a few days. But here's a few things about it, where what makes the show special was also, unfortunately, its downfall. First off, it's special and unique because it does stand alone from everything. There's no attachment to any greater storylines, apart from maybe being able to tell the story of Jadna Nawud as a kid being found by this female Jedi, and maybe it's a female Jedi that we are familiar with, There's no greater connection to anything going on in the Mandoverse at all. Anything that transpired during the original trilogy, the only connection that it has goes back to the prequel trilogy and the ending of the Republic, and even then, that planet happens to be where they made all the money. It's that simple. So for that aspect, it really makes it unique and special. This was truly a well-crafted, well-executed, fun adventure to go on with all these characters. The action was great, the acting was great, the special effects were spectacular, and it delivered on every episode from beginning to end. And we can dismiss with the runtimes now because you can just sit down and watch it, and the runtimes don't matter because you're not waiting for the next episode next week. You get a little bit of everything. You get some space action, you get spaceships, you get the adventure going on, you get the speeder bikes, and you get B-Wings at the end. It was fantastic for all those. You get lightsaber action. And again, when we go back and think of like A New Hope, you don't get a ton of lightsaber action in A New Hope apart from the fight between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader and the few times when Luke is wielding the lightsaber inside of the Millennium Falcon. So in this show, to have the lightsaber make an appearance, and I'm just kind of speaking to those things that we typically go and associate with Star Wars. Those we're kind of checking off we're hitting the check marks. We got the Force, we got lightsabers, we got spaceships, we got adventure, we got comedy. It's all there. Even John Norwood, when he was fighting off the supervisor's droids, was showing a bit of his prowess with the blade and blowing back the laser blasts. So, unfortunately, though, what makes this story unique and special is that it stands apart from everything. It's also kind of its downfall because of its lack of an audience, partly because there's no connection to existing storylines. And this is something that I talked about a lot on the show. I wish it wasn't that way, but when you don't have any connections to other parts of Star Wars storytelling, it's hard to go and get into deep discussions and speculate about what can happen. And even when we were watching the show, we were doing that a little bit, whether it was the banking clan and the mud pits on the planet and wanting to know if that was going to play into it. My own speculation that this could be something that sets the foundation for the creation of the First Order. None of that ended up being true. And unfortunately, the viewership for the show has been abysmal. Worse than the Acolyte was. And there's a lot of commentary within the fandom, and the criticism's correct. A big reason why there's a lack of viewership for Skeleton Crew is because Acolyte was such a critical failure. It's not the only reason. I think there's an oversaturation going on when it comes to Star Wars. Again, as I've said, I never expected that was going to happen, but here we are. And there's a pushback from people that just simply want to be in denial that the frustration around Acolyte didn't have an impact on this. It absolutely did. There's a lot of people that simply just didn't bother to check out Skeleton Crew because they got tired of watching subpar shows, and The Acolyte was one of those for a lot of people. Now, again, I enjoyed The Acolyte. I will go back and watch it, and I'll just skip a couple of episodes that I just don't enjoy. But for the most part, I thought it was well executed, not worth the amount of money in terms of the production value, which you see on screen. That should have looked like, every single episode should have looked like a movie, and it just simply didn't. But that being said, a lot of people hated that show. And I'll use Marvel as an example for me, that I just quit watching the Marvel TV shows. I didn't watch Loki season 2. I watched about half of Secret Invasion and just got bored. The trailer came out for Daredevil Born Again, and I really don't care. I'm kind of excited for Captain America Brave New World. It looks like this could be a return to MCU greatness. But Eternals kind of ruined a lot of stuff for me because Eternals just sucked. It wasn't good. So I don't know what Disney does from here. I don't know what they do with this amazing brand. I know there's been talk that they just shelve it for like 10 years and call it a day. We're going to talk about The Mandalorian and Grogu I think it's in their best interest to just move away from the live-action TV show stuff, even though it pains me to say that, and focus on blockbuster films and just get back to making good movies, which is really a bummer because Skeleton Crew was fantastic, and I would love to see a second season, and I'm really excited that we're getting a second season of Ahsoka. That's another series that I love, but I also want to see my Star Wars thrive and survive, and right now, I'm a little bit worried about its future.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
Bespin Bulletin has a story out based off of comments from Christian Harloff and the Christian Harloff Show. Embo to feature as the main villain in Star Wars, The Mandalorian and Grogu. Christian Harloff exclusively broke the news on his YouTube show that Embo, the bounty hunter that was previously featured in the animated series Clone Wars, is due to appear in the next live-action Star Wars theatrical release, The Mandalorian and Grogu, and is being voiced by Dave Filoni, who voiced Embo's animated counterpart. After a couple of busy days, Bespin Bulletin was writing up an exclusive report due to release the day after this one that Embo would feature in The Mandalorian and Grogu as the villain. I was first told of Embo's involvement in the feature film around the festive period, along with a handful of other details about the film, some of which Christian Harloff shared today on his YouTube show. Harloff revealed that Rhoda the Hutt played a prominent role in the movie, something I've mentioned previously, writes Bespin Bulletin, but that he thinks the movie is playing a similar storyline out as to the Clone Wars first movie, where Rhoda was kidnapped as a baby and had to be rescued. Harloff believes that Din Djarin and Grogu are hired to rescue Rhoda, and on the flip side, Embo, the main villain of the story, has been hired to kill Rhoda the Hutt. Now, the details that Harloff revealed are ones that I was told too, writes Bespin Bulletin, so I can back up this reporting. Not that it needs it. I'll add that I believe Embo is hired by some Hutts, possibly the two featured in the Book of Boba Fett. I've heard conflicting things about who hired Din. I was told once that it was the Hutts that hired Din, and another time I was told that it was the Republic. I don't know which one is correct, if either. But Zeb does appear from Rebels to assist Din in his quest at some point, which could point to Din Djarin being hired by the Republic. But that's merely speculation on Bespin Bulletin's part. As mentioned in a previous article, and something the readers are aware of, that he only covers outlets and individuals that he considers reputable and with proven track records. Christian Harloff is somebody I respect and enjoy as a personality and media pundit. Hasn't been someone I've covered in the past, but his Embo exclusive lines up from what I've heard, something I had multiple sources on and was planning to run. So, listen, this kind of makes sense when you consider that the Mandalorian and Grogu film was essentially what Mandalorian Season 4 was planned to be. This news doesn't get me excited. It just doesn't. I'm excited for a new Star Wars movie. I always will be. But, as I've said many times, I want to see a continuation of a saga story. Larger galactic implications. Jedis and Sith. That's what I would personally like to see. And right now, it seems like in this course correction that Disney is attempting to do, they're going for the most popular character, low-hanging fruit. And hopefully it works for Disney's part. I hope this movie makes $1 billion and is a massive success so that we can continue to get quality Disney films. I'm fearful that because this is essentially the Mandalorian TV show being put on the big screen, that it's not going to be like the major releases from Star Wars typically are. And it's going to be something more akin to Solo, a Star Wars story. You know, Rogue One was the anomaly. Rogue One tied into A New Hope, and so you had this direct connection. These are the events that lead to the events in A New Hope. That in and of itself is a draw, coming off the success of The Force Awakens. But those saga films are the bread and butter, man. That's where the gold is. and it's going to know that we are going to be entering into this larger universe with galactic stakes in play, and the Mandalorian and Grogu going to rescue Rhoda the Hutt with a bounty hunter going after him. Okay. It's not something that gets me really, really excited, though, and that kind of bums me out a little bit. Here's something, though, based off of some other rumors that have been out there.
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
So it's being reported that the girl that played young Ahsoka in the Ahsoka series, Anna Greenblatt, along with Anakin Skywalker being Hayden Christensen and Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ewan McGregor, that Anna Greenblatt, Hayden Christensen, and Ewan McGregor are all reprising their roles in Ahsoka Season 2. Now, I should say, apart from Obi-Wan Kenobi, who didn't appear in Ahsoka Season 1, but Ewan McGregor would be returning to reprise his role as Obi-Wan Kenobi in flashbacks for the Ahsoka Season 2. It makes some sense considering how popular that episode was in the first season of Ahsoka, where we got the Clone Wars flashbacks and how well that worked with Anna Greenblatt playing a young Ahsoka. I'm going to go this way, though. I don't think this is for Ahsoka Season 2. I think this is for a live-action Disney Plus Clone Wars show. Perhaps a movie or a mini-movie. That makes more sense to me. That I could see be a bigger draw. Like, you give me a Clone Wars era feature-length film with Anna Greenblatt as a young Ahsoka, Hayden Christensen as Anakin, and Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi. All right, I'm on board. I mean, that gets me excited. There you have direct implications and ties to the existing saga films. I just find that more compelling than another bounty hunter story, personally. I mean, they could be compared in terms of being spin-off stories. I just find that to be more exciting. But given how well that flashback worked in Ahsoka Season 2, my guess is that wires are getting crossed, and the assumption is that Ewan McGregor, Hayden Christensen, and Anna Greenblatt are coming back to do Ahsoka Season 2 when, given that Disney is trying to course correct, they greenlit The Mandalorian and Grogu, with The Mandalorian being the most popular Disney character and show in the Disney Plus, Disney Lucasfilm era. This makes sense to me that Bob Iger would go, listen, everybody loves the Clone Wars cartoon. These characters did a great job in that flashback. Why don't you do a mini movie or an 8-episode series on the Clone Wars in live action? So that's my guess. I would not be surprised if we find out these three actors being involved in a future project has nothing to do with Ahsoka Season 2 and everything to do with a live-action Clone Wars era piece of content. But what do you think? TalkShowNerd@gmail.com is the email address, or leave a comment up on YouTube.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
By the way, have you watched the Woman in the Sea, the Daisy Ridley film where she swims across the English Channel? I have not. I'm looking forward to watching it. J.J. Abrams said it was his favorite film of 2024, which I found surprising. All right, we got some email this week I want to share. Michael Tennett's got a couple of comments here. First one, on episode 7 of Skeleton Crew, he said, I've heard people calling this episode filler, which is crazy to me. For me, personally, when an episode takes the time to flesh out characters and move the story forward, it's anything but filler. And that ending was pure magic. Totally agree. He goes on to write, now the Skeleton Crew has wrapped. People are giving their final thoughts on the season finale, and the series as a whole. I personally enjoyed the entire season from start to finish and feel that John Watts knocked it out of the park. One thing that's been bugging me, however, is how many people online seem to feel as though the finale didn't measure up to their expectations. Now, I know this is nothing new, especially when it comes to the Star Wars fandom, but I can't help but think that we as a fan base have become far too conditioned to expect certain outcomes in order for something to be considered great. I totally agree. I've seen so many complaints that there wasn't a big enough reveal or twist, or that certain characters weren't adequately answered. And while I, too, would have loved more answers, I didn't feel that it lessened my experience or had an overall impact on how I'd rate the show. Maybe it's just me, but I don't need everything answered. I don't need huge twists or feel like everything has to be neatly connected and explained. I think Skeleton Crew is a big win for Star Wars, and that's no small thing considering the state of the franchise. I hope those who opted out to watch it eventually come around and give it a try, because I really believe it's one of the best things that we've gotten out of the Disney era. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Listen, I totally agree with your comments, Michael. And as a matter of fact, let me expand upon something. And I saved my comment in my little review of The Good Guys for Real, the last episode of Skeleton Crew. But at the end, when the Corellian Corvette shows up, right? The Tantive 4 looking ship, but it's blue. So very similar to the one that we saw in Revenge of the Sith. Okay. It pops up right at the end after the battle, after the Republic shows up. When it comes flying in, I know that I was expecting that we were going to get some big cameo. We typically do when it comes to these series. You had the cameo of Anakin at the end of Ahsoka. That being said, him as a Force ghost was kind of a big reveal, considering that we were just seeing him in the World Between Worlds flashback before that. But you look at the reveal of Luke Skywalker at the end of Mandalorian Season 1. You look at the end of the Acolyte when they dropped Yoda in there at the very end. Spoiler alert. When that Republic Corvette showed up, I was expecting that's what was going to happen. It would land, the kids would be there, and then out would walk like Princess Leia, because she would be alive in this era. I'm glad they didn't, just like I'm glad they didn't go with Snoke, because the show didn't need it. And it would have taken away from what made the show special, and it was those kids. My guess is they actually did have that filmed. I think it's really odd that famous of a ship showing up at the end of the series, and it being shown in that flying in shot above the Onyx Cinder when it's crashed into the building, and then actually seeing it fly over the city being escorted by X-Wing fighters. My guess is they had a cameo and they pulled it at the last minute. Now, it could have been for a number of reasons, right? They could make that edit long. I mean, that edit could have been made in the middle of when the other episodes were airing. And perhaps they weren't getting the viewership that they wanted. Maybe there was a reveal that would speak to a season 2. And that's why they decided to pull it at the end. That's my guess, that there was a cameo at the end of Skeleton Crew, and it would have set up for a second season. But because a second season probably is out of the question, they decided to pull that out, but we still see the Corvette show up. Kilo 13 writes, I don't think there have been emissaries arriving before Jod. Turns out you're right. They are just being minted and stored at this time for the great work, which is not intended for the First Order, and perhaps end up funding that. The supervisor is probably an AI android system. Nicely done. My issue with the very bad episode 7, 8, and 9 is that anything before that has to fit their story time frame. And again, I don't agree. I love those films, be that as it may. I was hoping for Skeleton Crew Season 2 and not expecting them to get home by the end of Season 1. But we'll see what the final episode has to show us. I'm glad that the Jod character hasn't suddenly become soft on the kids over the course of a few episodes, and he certainly doesn't in the final episode. That would have ruined it for me. Skeleton Crew, Ahsoka, Andor, Mando Season 1 and 2 have been good Star Wars. But I hear the Skeleton Crew is not getting the ratings because of an expectation of failure that has been set, and those who probably would enjoy it are just not tuning in. Yep, you know what? Apart from our disagreement on episode 7, 8, and 9, you pretty much nailed everything else there, Kilo 13. Thank you for your comment. And lastly, Tommy Bowman writes, I'm convinced that Neil's dad is a supervisor. Nope. Just look at that hologram projection and check out the small info we got on him in the first episode. That guy is a menacing beast. And, of course, that turned out not to be the case. But I appreciate your speculation nonetheless. Listen, before I let you go, you enjoy science fiction. If you like reading or listening to audiobooks, check out my science fiction space opera series. It's called EMBARK. It's a fast-paced sci-fi space opera, action-packed adventure. It's great for ages 11 plus, even though I wrote it for adults. 7 books in all in the series. And I have a brand new description for book 1 that I wanted to share with you. If my previous descriptions weren't enough to entice you to purchase book 1 in the series in your preferred format of ebook, Kindle Unlimited, paperback, hardcover, or audiobook, maybe this description will. With interstellar travel possible, pilots are the future, and humanity won't survive without them. Taft Guardia reluctantly agrees to join his small band of fellow pilots and sneak off-world to a deserted moon outpost. But when a catastrophic industrial accident back home sets off an apocalyptic chain of events, there may be nothing left to return to. Upon arrival, Taft discovers the advanced freighter The Anniversary left abandoned. Excitement turns to fear when they come under attack, with the infamous vessel becoming a lifeboat in their fight for survival. When a ruthless corporate madman with an armada at his disposal attempts to gain control during the global evacuation, it's up to Taft and his ragtag crew to save Earth's evacuees before it's too late. EMBARK is available on Amazon.com. Just search for EMBARK, E-M-B-A-R-K, and Jon, Jon Justice, and pick up your preferred version of book 1 or all 7 books in the series. Thank you so much for checking out this week's episode. Don't know what we'll be talking about next week, but I will certainly be here to talk about it. Until then, I hope wherever you are, you're happy, you're healthy, and you're safe. I'll talk to you next week. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My nerd road.